you know what? I'm going to set this reality. The best things come to you. We don't have to. We can simply say yes to the things that really light us up.
Hey besties, and welcome to our cozy corner of the podcasting world. It's time for another episode of Share A Latte podcast. Here, extraordinary women gather like friends at a coffee shop, sipping on life's challenges and sharing how they've triumphed over every obstacle. I'm your host, Min Sukri, your virtual coffee bestie. I'm here to brew up a heartwarming cup of empowerment, one inspiring story at a time. Imagine us nestled up in a cozy cafe, surrounded by the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, all set for a journey that stirs your heart, awakens your mind, and gears you up to tackle any challenge that's thrown your way. In each episode of Share A Latte, remarkable women share their stories about how they've weathered life's storms and emerged wiser, stronger, and more determined. These stories are like a warm embrace for your soul, reminding you that resilience and determination are the secret to success. So grab your favorite brew, get comfy, and get ready to soak in these amazing conversations. You'll discover your own power to turn these tough times into incredible strengths. The Share A Latte podcast sprinkles hope, courage, and the belief that you can not only handle life, but thrive into your day. All right, besties, it's time to embrace those tales of triumphs and get ready for another episode of Share A Latte. Hey there, latte besties, and welcome back to another inspiring episode of Share A Latte. I'm your host, Min, and today we're diving into a fascinating journey of a guest who's all about breaking chains of societal expectations, pressures, and cultural norms. With a hit podcast, Jenn Liss is on a mission to inspire thousands of listeners to live their most authentic, joyful, and abundant life. Known for her candid and honest style, she makes the world of self-development work comfortable, relatable, and even fun. Whether it's speaking on stage, coaching, or guiding her audience through breathwork sessions, she's here with us today to share her knowledge on how to cultivate our unique gifts and lead to a happier life. So get ready for a latte-fueled chat that will leave you inspired and empowered. Welcome back, guests. I'm so excited to be joined by Jenn today. So let's kick it off. Jenn, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started cultivating your unique gifts to create your own happiness?
Oh my goodness. First of all, thank you for having me on. You're such a delight, and what a delight for your listeners that you've created this podcast and this space for these conversations. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So if you would have asked me 5, 6, 7 years ago, where will you be? I would not have told you where I am and what are the gifts that you were using. There's no way. It's like that Steve Jobs quote where it's like, you never know the dots looking forward. You only know them looking back. And so it's such a beautiful journey that has brought me to today. So I was a hairstylist for 12 years, did hair, self-employed, loved it. Loved it. I loved my job until one day I didn't. I just didn't. I just didn't love it anymore. And I realized that this moment happened when I'm doing one of my clients' hair. Lovely client. Loved her. She's amazing. One of the most beautiful, most amazing people. I loved her sitting in my chair every single time. And I'm standing there with the color brush in my hand. And I'm just like, I don't even care that she's here. I just want to be somewhere else. And I was like, ooh, what was that thought, Jenn, that just passed through your head? That's not okay. And so that led me down a journey of going back to school. Ended up completely leaving my entire full clientele. I was more than a 6-figure hairstylist. Like I was full. Yeah, I was like at capacity where there's no way I was working like 12-hour days, which is a problem in its own right. Trying to get all my clients in. And so I ended up going into corporate America, did creative work, ended up going into employee experience, executive communications, really moved my way up there and found myself again, like, I'm just so done with this. And I'm like, what is happening? I'm like, okay, something's going on. There is a pattern. One time is one thing, 2 times is a pattern. What is happening with me? And that led me to turn inward and to begin exploring what is it that's going on here. And through that journey, I have ended up finding my way to coaching, speaking, breath work, which is just, it's wild. I'm back in service. Like when I when I did hair. And what you asked about gifts, what's so fascinating to me is that even in those times of frustration where I'm like, what is going on? I need to look
Mhm.
inward. I was just continuing to follow my gifts and follow the nudges from the universe. And so many of us are. We're getting these nudges. That moment with my client was a nudge. It was a simple nudge from the universe saying, it's time. Like, it's time.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
people will ask me, do you
absolutely.
miss doing hair? And I'm like, no, it was
Right.
just time.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So,
Right.
anyway, that's how I've gotten to that's the very short form story of how I've
Right.
gotten to today.
Amazing. So what was it that led you down a path to figure out what you wanted? Because 5 years, like we're saying 5 years, but let's like guys, like 2 years, 3 years ago was the pandemic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
So
5 years, it's really not that long.
it's not that long and it is that long. Isn't it just so
Right.
interesting
Yes.
time? We could
Yes.
talk all day about how
Yeah.
time is just such a concept, but this journey really started in 2012. So it's really been the acceleration of the path, the turning inward happened about 5 years ago where I was like, ooh, something is really juicy here with this pattern. And so what actually happened was what could have happened to one of your listeners, in fact. I was
Right.
like, I need help. So I went online and I put in creative career help because I just associated myself as a creative. I was like, I'm not doing things anymore that feel as creative as I loved. Creative career help. And I was led to a podcast. I didn't even listen to podcasts, by the way. This was my first podcast I ever listened to. And I found this woman, and turns out she's a coach. And I joined her coaching program, and she helped me to explore. And it's much of what I do for people today too, because there's so many people who need help along their journey, like me. I mean, I was like floating in the ocean and just like, somebody send me a life preserver. Like, what is happening here? And
Amazing.
yeah, and she was there. Yeah, just like you could be there for somebody else too.
Right. Awesome. So 2012. So 2012 was when you left your hair business
Right.
and then you jumped into corporate. How long were you in corporate?
I was in corporate until I just left last year. So I just left corporate last year, and I kept my hair
First of
business
all,
by
congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll never say never that I won't go back. At this
No,
point, I
of
have
course.
switched careers enough to be like, I'm never going to say never to anything. Who knows if for
Of
some
course.
reason there might be something that takes me back into that kind of thing on my journey. I can't see it now. Who the heck knows? I obviously can't craft this path entirely for myself. So,
Right.
but yeah, I was in corporate for close to a decade.
Ooh, that weighs heavy on my heart. There's still some scars, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, did you also keep your hair business?
I Girl. Yes. Yes. I loved my clients so much. And there were some of them. So here's what I did that was actually a huge lesson. And I know it's not entirely the topic of this podcast, but I love to share it. And since we're kind of leading in that
No,
direction right
let's share
now.
it.
Yeah. So what I did, I was working so much and burning out. Like, let's be real. When you're
Yes.
working 12, 13-hour days, there were days that I would get to work at 7 a.m. and I would be finishing my last client at 10 p.m. And she was an 80-year-old woman. That's the only time she could get in. So her husband drove her to her appointment because she couldn't see well enough at night. Like, that's how hard I was working. And
Wow,
how
that's a
bad my
lot.
clients were like, I'm just going to come for a hair appointment at 8:30 p.m. It's like, it
Right.
was ridiculous. So what I did, because I had no choice, I was like, I've got about 15 hours a week that I can dedicate still to doing hair while working a 40-hour a week job, right? I'm like, oh, I'm going down from like 80 hours a week to 55, no big deal, right? So
Right.
I had to cut my clients, and I could think of no other way to do it than to double my prices and be like, who wants it?
Right.
Who wants it? Who is willing to pay double the price? Because I want to make the same amount of money that I was making or close to it. And it was actually more than double. And I'm going to work less hours. So anybody who wants it. And you know what happened?
Nobody left.
The
Nobody left.
most amazing, well, people didn't want to, and some people
Right.
had to, but the most amazing people stayed. Like those gem clients who were so easy, who were just like, that person whose hair I was doing that day was my very last client. Like that person was there until the very end. Those people stuck around. And I was like, isn't this interesting? All of the people who kind of stressed me out, or I would have to go to the back and breathe a little bit just to prep for their appointment, gone. Just melted
Oh my
away.
gosh, that's amazing. That in and of itself is amazing because it was like the universe is like, oh, listen, you learned your lesson.
Yeah. And I think we can all take that lesson, anybody in a service industry, but in general,
yes.
like where am I working so hard for the things that aren't really bringing me joy, that aren't really bringing me value? And when you say, you know what, I'm going to set this reality, the best things come to you. And I'm just seeing that. It's what I coach on because I saw it then. I saw that example of it and I see it time and time again. It doesn't have to, you don't have to walk on your knees for 100 miles. Like Mary Oliver says in her poem, why is it wild geese or wild goose? Anyway, it's like, we don't have to, we can simply say yes to the things that really light us up.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's insane hours. I'm trying to comprehend how.
It's not a good idea.
Let's go back for a second before we dive into more of this. But how did you function? We say this often, if you have to do something, you're just going to make it happen. Right? So, but how did you function?
Well, there's two things. I did love my job. I loved it. So I loved the people. It was so creative. It was so fun for me. Just like, I've always loved work. And so for me, that is like it's my strength and my flaw, I suppose, because I just love to work. I love to serve people. I love to help. And so I get myself in that situation because that's where I love to be, is in service to other people. So it feels good to me until it doesn't. But there was a joke with my husband's friend group. They were like, oh, did you rent Jenn for the weekend? Like I was a rental because I would only show up so very rarely that they'd be like, oh, here comes Joey's cardboard wife, because he's like only brings me in the times that he rents me, because that's how little I was able to be around because I was always working, even in the evenings, So yeah, how did I do it? Because I loved it. And
that helps heavily.
That doesn't make it okay. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. How did you find your gifts? What steps did you take to find your gifts? Here are gifts.
Yes, that's such a good question. It's such a good question and such an important one. So one of the things that I love to impart on people is that every single thing that you have done in your life, every single experience from the time that you are conceived, in fact, because you're already experiencing in the womb, everything that you are absorbing and experiencing, they're all gifts that you receive. Yeah. Even the things that we feel like are really hard for us, or maybe are a challenge or like a mental thing that we've had to work through, they all become gifts. They all become your unique experience. It's your magic that you bring to the world, because as inspiration and creativity flow through you and into the world, it's like flowing through you and picking up all your little pieces of glitter. So anything that flows through you is going to come out in only the way that you can. So just like starting with that, every single one of us is an amazing creative being, capable of creating things, capable of bringing things to life as human beings. It's what we do. It's what we're here to do. Like nothing else can bring things to life, and nobody else has had the skills and experiences that you have. So if we just level set with that, and if everyone can accept or at least consider this idea that that is true for you, you have just these amazing gifts. And so when we look back at our life, I'm like, wow, as a hairstylist, I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to ask people questions. I learned how to be really spontaneous and think in the moment. And so it's reflecting back on what are some of the things that I may have learned along my journey that I could bring in any moment. And so many of us are not doing that. It's like we're showing up in our corporate role and we're like, okay, in this role, I am a copywriter. And that's what I do. I write, which was my role, my first corporate role. But I wasn't thinking about the fact that when I did hair, I also had all of these other people skills, presentation skills, talking people into something or out of something skills that ended up supporting me so deeply in that role. And especially when I recognized them. So one of the things that I recommend people do, if you're like, what are my gifts? I don't know what my
Yes.
gifts are. You're like, that's actually my question, Jen.
Yes. That's me. I'm asking that.
Yeah. There's two sides. Can I ask you? Can I just ask you?
Yeah. Let's
Okay.
play.
I get so excited about this stuff. It's so fun. Okay. What was one of the things that you loved to do when you were 7 years old?
Oh, I was probably a little too old to be playing with Barbies at this point, but and with the Barbie movie coming out, this really just brings me back. But my Barbies had like the best wardrobe, like the best wardrobe. And it's probably played out in my adult life now. But she got a new outfit every single day with like the accessories, the shoes, the hair. I would spend like easily an hour just prepping her before I got ready and dressed at the age of 7. Like even before going to school, like I would get up early in the morning, get my Barbie and lay out her clothes and her accessories and then dress her. And she would sit or stand. She didn't have a stand, but she'd lean on something. And that's where she'd be all day. And then at night, I'd come back, I'd undress her and get her ready for nighttime. And she would have her PJs. Yeah. Fashion has been, now that I'm really thinking about it, as a pivotal part of my life. Anytime I'm sad, I have a comfort clothes. It plays into my adult life. It probably takes up a lot more of my mental structure than I think it does. This is a horrible line, but when Carrie said in Sex and the City, I used to buy Vogue because I felt like it fed me more. I never understood anything more than in that moment.
So beautiful. You're like, I feel so seen. By the way, your nails today, for anybody listening, are like Barbie pink.
Yeah.
And you look so cute. You're doing it. See how quickly you put together. Oh my goodness, this thing from when I was 7 that brought me so much joy then, I'm playing that out in my life today. And one of the things that I noticed was that you said a couple of things. You were like, well, you know, it's probably taking up more of my mental space than it should. And it's like, is it more than it should? Or could you be leaning into this thing about yourself more?
Right. Okay.
Because the Vogue thing, you're like, I love reading Vogue. Like, this is what I love. So there's something that you love. That's a breadcrumb of your gifts. Not everybody enjoys that. That is not what I liked doing with my Barbies. I cut their hair. Drove my mother nuts because I would chop their hair
cut
off.
her hair.
Yeah.
Because it couldn't grow back. Why would you do that?
I know it was not a good idea. Then they were useless to me. So this is the thing, came into this world with certain things about yourself and then all of these things along the way. And we go back to childhood. Like, what brought me joy as a child? What was that thing? Because you've been following that all your life. And the more you can lean into what is it that brings me joy, you're leaning into your gifts, because that's the path that was meant for you, the path that is easeful, the path that is joyful. That's really what you're meant to bring into the world. Maybe you're meant to help other people just enjoy their fashion, enjoy, or maybe it's just the meticulous nature of you wanting to put that together. And there could be just little bits of clues for yourself. So that's one side. And self-reflection is, what did I really love? What just really lights me up? And just the more we start to unfurl that, the more we start to lean in and see it, the deeper you can. And that 7-year-old question is such a good one.
Oh my God, that was so mind-blowing in the moment. Like when you said the meticulous, because when it comes to my clients, I'm extremely meticulous in how their podcasts are broken down, put together. Oh my gosh.
See? And it brings you joy. And look how you're doing it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you can intentionally do this, when you add this bit of intentionality, changes everything. It's like suddenly you're aware. And so then you can lean in. You've been doing it anyway because your intuition's been guiding you your entire life. And then when you add that mental awareness to it, and there's a lot less frustration in our lives because you're able to lean into it and you don't feel guilty about it. It's like, oh, I don't need to feel guilty about doing what I love. It's what I love. It's what I'm made to do. That's the gift that I offer. And what a gift you offer to your podcast.
That's amazing. I never would have made that connection. I hope everybody is thinking about their like younger 7-year-old self and picking apart what they were doing at that age and what gave them joy. What if it doesn't feel like you're able to connect it to your now current self?
Okay,
We
let's do the
walked through
flip
the
side.
process. Okay.
Yep, let's do the flip
Let's
side.
do the flip side. Okay, good.
What's something that you're curious about right now? Just curious about. Could be anything. It could be that this morning you woke up and you were like, why did the bananas turn brown overnight? Like just something, maybe it's something you've been looking up or something struck your interest.
Lately, it's been a lot, but AI is taking over, right? I have been playing around on multiple AI platforms. That's one. Two, I'm heavy into reading over the past 2 years. TikTok, book talk has really changed my world a little bit. And I feel like I'm not consuming enough books. What else have I been kind of, I feel like, sounds horrible, but I feel like I've had a really boring existence lately.
It's not boring. You're helping prepare us for the future with AI. But what do one or both of those things? What's just one thing that those might indicate about you? That curiosity that you have about
I'm
AI.
extremely curious. I'm extremely curious. And I know for a fact I'd like to overanalyze. Like one of the things that when I work with a business coach, the first thing I tell them is that I am the person who will overanalyze but never execute. I'll analyze till the end of time. But the execution, like when I have to get to the point of execution, I'm halted and I'm well aware of what happens. Sometimes I've sat with business coaches before I launch something so that I'm forced to press a button to launch because I'm well aware that I just overanalyze everything.
Well, how might that ability to analyze, thank you, by the way, for allowing us to go down this rabbit hole, but how might that ability to analyze be a gift that you have, that you've honed over time?
I think it helps me to look outside of and see really the bigger picture. I'm also a very optimistic when I analyze. So I tend to float right away to something that's going to be positive and how well it's going to, and obviously it's the muscle I've built. It's not always been that way. But one, I definitely look outside the box, especially when I sit down with a new podcast client and they will say to me, I just don't know if one, there's listenership, or two, what would I talk about like this week or in 7 weeks? I'm able to look at it from an overhead view saying, well, this is happening in the world and this is what I would be talking about if I were to launch a podcast in your space at this moment in time.
Yeah. Look at that. The gifts that you put together over this thing that maybe you sometimes look at as a weakness as actually your strength. And often our strengths, everything has a shadow side. Your strongest strengths are often your strengths because it's something that you have been challenged with. And so over time, you have honed it. You've honed it, you've honed it, you've honed it, but that shadow can still exist. So then you partner with people who push you because okay, this is my strength. It's also my weakness. And so I'm going to have somebody come and support me, or I'm going to implement things into my life that help me to support in that area. So anybody can do this. So we do the 7-year-old self question. You reflect, how has that kind of played out in my life? How could I be playing with that more? What am I curious about today? And what does that indicate about me? Now, there's the third thing that you can do. I recommend doing these 2 things first. And then the third thing that you can do, reach out to 5 people and say, what is the value that you see that I bring to the world?
Ooh, I think you should do that in general.
Yes, you should do this about every 6 months and just reach out and you could put a post on social media. You could blame it and say, my coach told me to do this. I listened to this podcast and this chick told me to do this, or whatever feels good to you. Cause I know it can be scary to ask for that kind of feedback and it feels random and weird, but ask your mom, ask a sibling, ask friends, ask a colleague, ask your boss, just ask somebody at the grocery store that you randomly, what did you value about me? It's just asking that question. We're going to get the reflection of others. So I always recommend doing a little bit of self first because it's easier for us to look to the outside sometimes and then ask others what they see in us. And then look at all of those things. Like, where is there overlap? Where is there something that they saw in me that I didn't see? Where's there overlap between what people are saying? Are they like, oh, you always look at the big picture and you also had said that and you're like, okay, here's one of my like really big strengths that people are seeing about me. And then you can get this well-rounded view of yourself and start to think more about, okay, where can I lean into that 7-year-old self of mine, these things that bring me joy, my curiosities, while also bringing the strengths that people are seeing the value in, because that's where we know there's something the world needs. If somebody's seeing a strength in us, that's something that the world needs, right? Because they're like,
Right.
oh, I want to be more like that, or I could use more of that.
Oh, I like it. I like it. That's amazing. I love it. Okay, so now how do we unleash these gifts into the world that's going to create and cultivate our own happiness? If you're unleashing your gift, you're already happy, right? Like if you're working in that space and you're giving it to being of service to people or just doing it for yourself, it's definitely bringing in the happiness. But how do we unleash it into the world?
We create things, we do things, we do. We do. The overanalyzing and the overthinking and just being in our head and thinking about doing does not generally bring us joy. It can bring us a certain amount if you're somebody who loves to analyze, but we are creators. We are meant to create. So doing something like you creating a podcast, we're both podcasters. So that's something that we felt some creative nudge. We were interested in it. It brought us joy in some way. And so we have brought that into the world. Your business that you are doing, my coaching business that I am doing, when I was a copywriter, when I was a hairstylist, whatever it is that the listeners are doing, it's like, what can I do that would bring me more joy? And that might be just starting with a hobby. We don't always have to be like, this is going to be my business and this is what I'm going to do forever.
Yeah.
It's like, just go to a yoga class, go experience yoga. If you're like, I think that there might be some calling on my heart to host a retreat, go to a retreat. Go experience it. That can be doing. Buy a book about something, start to read about it. That's all we need to do. Sometimes we think the action needs to be so big, but really it's just following that. You said you're such a curious person. Just follow that curiosity. Those are the little nudges. Curiosity is like your superpower. Such a superpower. All of the most successful people are incredibly curious.
Right. I love that. And it's the act of doing, right? The minute you get into it, then you're going to recognize what it is that's going to bring you tons of joy. That's amazing. Okay. What are 2 other tips that we can implement today to help get us into our unique self and using our unique gifts?
Yeah. Well, one thing, what makes you weird makes you really awesome. So also, like, what's that
So
awkward
true.
thing about yourself from like middle school that you were like, I don't want anybody to know. I don't want anybody to know this weird thing about me. Like, you could always look to that because it made you weird as a kid, but it makes you really, really awesome as an adult. Now, another thing, I'm a breath worker. And the reason that I got into breath work is because I recognize that our nervous systems are a mess. Like we are all living in fight, flight, freeze. The corporate world is so built on competition and stress. And I did a study on this when I worked in the corporate world. There is no safety. There's no emotional safety. And so many people are going and living every day without emotional safety. Our nervous systems are in the sympathetic. So breath work and using our breath to help our nervous system be more flexible is something that I'm really passionate about. Now you can go down this episode is not about that necessarily. You can go down a whole rabbit hole if you are curious about breath work, but it's true that our breath is here to support us. It's here with you from the day that you wake up until the day that you die. We are always breathing. And our breath is one of the things that we can manipulate. You can't manipulate your heart. You can't necessarily through meditation and things, but you can't really tell your brain to do certain things to release brain. Please release dopamine right now. It can't, but you can tell your breath, breathe deeply. You can tell your breath to breathe out through your nose.
Right.
You can tell your breath to hold. We can control our breath, and our breath is attached to our nervous system. So one of the beautiful things, it's like the easiest tool is to take a deep breath in through your nose and actually allow your diaphragm to expand, to lower down below your ribs. And most of us don't even know how to feel our diaphragm. So it takes some practice sometimes, but if you can take a deep breath in, like sit up straight and take a deep breath in through your nose and just see if you can allow, it's not even just a belly breath. It's like allowing that diaphragm to drop and hold it for 4 seconds. So it's 4-second breath in, hold for 4 seconds, and then allow that diaphragm to contract back up. So it's the expansion on the inhale, holding for 4, and then allowing it to contract back up on the exhale. So your listeners can try this and do some experimentation with it. But what diaphragmatic breathing is so powerful. There's a doctor, Dr. Aman, who has done studies on this. And he says it is one of the most powerful things because it activates your parasympathetic system, which is your rest and digest. Look at how many of us are struggling with digestive issues in the world right now, which there's a lot of reasons for that, and food and things like that. But one of them is that we're living in the sympathetic nervous system, which doesn't allow our blood to flow properly to our digestive system. So our digestive systems are locked up most of the day, and then finally they relax, and it causes a lot of problems. So this is attached to following your gifts and following your joy, because if your nervous system is a mess, then you're just always tightened up and we can't be creative.
Right.
We can't flow.
Yes.
We literally cannot get into a flow state while we're in fight, flight, freeze. So breathing, doing the exercise that we just did, like as I did it, and actually I would love to hear, were you able to do it? Could you feel that diaphragm moving down?
I could feel it. Yes.
Did you feel any sensations in your body as you did it?
I was a lot more relaxed. I do yoga every day, and now I'm wondering if I'm doing my yoga wrong. That's what it made me think of. I was like, oh, this is a different, it was a different sensation for sure. But it was also causing me to be in the moment for a second. I think our lives are running on hyper craziness, and I'm thinking of the next thing all the time, where this really kind of kept me in the moment. But it was a different sensation. Like I felt more relaxed. I felt kind of at peace with those, we did 2 breaths.
That's all it takes sometimes. Yeah. And you can do longer breathwork journeys. The breathwork journeys I take people on are meditative. We go into a meditative state, we breathe, and then we do self-connection, actual connection to ourselves, to our hearts, to our bodies. That's a lot of what's missing for people, is that we're so heady. We're all up in our heads. We're disconnected from our body, and our intuition speaks to us through our bodies, through our emotions, through our feelings. And so when there's there's trauma, things like that have disconnected people from their bodies that we don't need to get into today, but just taking a couple of deep breaths is so powerful. Like I did it with you, and I felt tingly in my toes. I felt like all of a sudden my feet are on the floor again. I kind of wasn't feeling my feet. And so it just really helps you drop back down into your body. And by the way, you're not doing yoga wrong. It's all a practice. They call it a practice for a reason.
Yes, it is a practice. It just makes you think, right? Because the yoga teacher is telling you to breathe. So I was like, okay, well, I mean, I've done the breathing yoga, but it was it was much more relaxed feeling. It was a very different feeling than what I would normally get from yoga, which was really nice. And I'm probably going to put this a little more into my daily routine, in the sense that I'll probably set an alarm on my phone that goes off to remind me to take like 3 deep breaths, doing the same kind of stuff, just to see what that feels like after 7 days. And, you never know what little things you can do to change your day to make it a little happier.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I loved our conversation, Jenn. This was amazing. But let's tell people where they can find you, because one, Jenn gives some really cute tips on her Instagram. If you go follow her, she's adorable over there. And you get a personalized welcome message, which is also nice.
I love connecting with people. That's one of the things that when I was a hairstylist, it's like, deep connection has always been a powerful thing to me. And the more I go inward, the more I realize that. So yeah, I'll give you a personalized message. But yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Untethered Jenn there. I also have a podcast, Untethered with Jenn Liss. And then my website is just jennliss.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jenn. Before we wrap up, what is your favorite coffee order?
Oh, a honey oat latte hot.
Oh my gosh, that sounds delicious. I haven't had a coffee today yet, so I'm about to head over to a small coffee shop here. I'm in BC, you guys, so I'm going to head over and probably order that. I've been trying
Go
new
get
coffee
one
orders.
too. We'll toast. We'll cheers
Yes,
each other
we'll
from
cheers.
across the world.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Jenn, for joining us. And that's a wrap on another episode of Share A Latte. I hope that you got just as much out of this episode as I did. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Jenn, for joining us. Your candid and relatable style is a breath of fresh air in the self-development world. Always remember, besties, to live life authentically. I'll see you next time. If today's episode added a touch of warmth and inspiration to your day, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By doing so, you won't miss out on any future heartwarming journeys we'll embark on together. And hey, if you enjoyed our flavorful conversations and the embrace of this beautiful podcast, why not take a moment to leave a review? Your thoughts and your feedback mean the world to me, and it might even help others discover the magic of Share A Latte. So whether it's a few words or a heartfelt reflection, your review goes a long way in spreading the joy. Life is like a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, a blend of experiences that come together to create something truly remarkable. Just like every bean contributes to unique flavor, every cup in our cup of stories adds a depth of richness to our journey. Until next time, besties, remember you have the power to turn your trials into triumphs and your scars into stars. Keep believing in yourself, keep chasing those dreams, and above all else, keep thriving. This is Min taking her last sip from the Share A Latte podcast, reminding you that life happens and coffee helps.